Oh, we're live. Oh, we already have comments. Look at this. Scott Connor. Let's go. Been waiting for this for years, says Jared in the comments. Look at this. Look at these comments. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. Let's fucking go from Dylan Vergara. Oh, man. Let's fucking go. Harry Snowman. Look at the chat. It's already happening. This is incredible. They're already reminding me that the last show I did, I did an Epson ad, and then for some reason there was a glitch in the software, and I was muted the entire remaining show. I didn't even know until the end. And then people were calling me. I got all these missed calls. Hey, you're muted. You're muted. I'm focusing, man. I'm trying to look in the camera. I got thoughts. I got notes. I had no idea. And then I had the chat minimized like an idiot. I'm not minimizing the chat ever again. The chat would have let me know. So I fucked up. Then what I had to do, Scott, I had to go back and post in iMovie, take my backup audio from the podcast and overdub myself and re-upload it. And so there's a few sections where it's like my mouth's not quite lined up with what I'm saying. But I was like, this is the best I can do, people. Wasn't my fault. I take no responsibility for it. It was a glitch in the software. Audio was perfect for 12 minutes. How you doing, buddy?
Awesome. The hellacious stories of a content creator when you have to do all the work.
Hellacious. That's right.
All the editing, all the post-production, making sure it actually looks good. Sounded great on your end, but then you got to make sure it's actually looking good when you put it out to people. Yeah. Some hellacious stories on my end I've had in the past as well.
Lesson learned, have a backup audio. Just run a backup audio. I don't know how many times I've done that and never used it. And I was like, wait a second. I think I have a backup audio. I think we can work with this. And then sure enough, because it was the streaming software that glitched, my backup audio was perfect, man. It was a great show. That was the thing. I was like, man, I should redo the show. And I was like, I think it was a good show. Throwing away a good show, that's heartbreaking for a content creator, right?
Oh, yeah. I've lost a couple in the past. And the worst part is when you have a guest. Oh. They're like, hey, yeah, we lost 2 hours of that. Can you find time to come back and do it again? And it's never better the second time. There's some things where you can tweak, but it's never organic the second time. You're trying to recreate some of the same magic that you had the first time. Bad idea. And I need to get on that backup audio because I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I'm just lazy and I'll just record it on whatever platform I'm using. And if that goes wrong, what am I supposed to do? So that's actually, I'm going to write that down as we're potting.
I'm looking at it right now. We're at the 1803 mark of my backup audio. I'm looking at it right now. So we'll get started. You're the roster construction savant. That'll be the bring in. So I'm excited. We have a great show sheet. Great show for everybody today. I'm going to be running an ad break at the halfway point in the show, and we are going to be running the Epson ad at the halfway point, and I'm a little nervous about it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But and in the podcast, I'm going to do a little ad break, which I never do in an interview, but now we're going to try. We're a little bit trying to be a little more grown-up podcast and streaming organization this year, and so I was convinced to do this. And then we're going to run a little music, and then we're going to come back, and then I have a new segment that we're doing. That I'm not gonna let them know what the new segment is. They'll have to stay tuned to hear what this new segment is, but I'm excited for it. So I'll bring you in right now. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, a Dynasty roster construction savant. This show is 2 years in the making. Joining me today is Scott Connor. Talk to me.
Matt Kelly, the Podfather, finally glad to be here. I had shades of old Michael Buffer. I spent last weekend watching a bunch of old Mike Tyson fights for some reason. And nothing better than a late 80s, early 90s pay-per-view boxing match with Michael Buffer with his original Let's Get Ready to Rumble. That's just what popped in my head when you gave me the intro.
holds that L, right? That's good. It's amazing though. Like if you're the brother of Michael Buffer, there's no way, right? There's no way you're ever going to get to his level. You're like, I'm always going to be the little brother, the afterthought brother. And then for him to actually, at this point, be almost as well recognized, if not more recognized because of the popularity of the UFC, Bruce Buffer now has his own level of gravitas that's almost, if not equal to his brother. It's kind of a great story for a younger brother. These younger brothers, man, these younger brothers are so hungry, right? The older brother typically has like all these advantages and they get out to the early lead, right? This is in sports. This is in so many areas. And then this younger brother is always the one that's like, you know what? I'm coming after you and it might take 20 years. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually looked that up when I was watching those for some reason. I'm sitting on my phone and I go, "This Michael Buffer, how much money did he make with just that single phrase?" $400 million net worth. Bruce Buffer's net worth $12 million. So he still is the little brother when it comes to, career earnings or net worth. But yeah, to say,
shut up,
my brother's the most famous, and I'm going to go into the exact same business and try to create like my own legacy doing it, I got to say it's pretty impressive. I'm not sure which one's more impressive, but you got to go with Michael. He's the originator.
400 million. Well, that's the power of a catchphrase.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
See, Bruce doesn't have a catchphrase like Michael does. This is a full-blown catchphrase that he probably was able to monetize with royalties and licensing. It's amazing. From like video games.
Oh, yeah, that's where he's made his money.
Oh, man, that's it. Isn't that it?
Sure.
That's got to be it, right?
Yeah, it's not. He probably got paid decently when he was actually like an appearance fee once he got, pretty deep into his career. But yeah, everything else, like how many times have you heard that in a movie or a video game or a song like that? That's where he's making his money. All the royalties where they're still using it for sure.
I mean, I know Bruce Buffer has, it's time. I get it, right? I know it's good. It's good. It's just not like pop culture relevant the way Let's Get Ready. I mean, come on.
I mean, have you heard "It's Time" anywhere except for the UFC?
No. Though, if I were an artist, a singer, rapper, I would consider creating a song called "It's Time" and then adding that, sampling that. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Anyone out there that's making music, sample that. Told you so. Okay. So. You saw this the Super Bowl, right? We should talk about this briefly, very briefly. Do you think it was a better game than the Eagles-Patriots game a few years ago?
No, I still go Eagles-Patriots. I just think that had more back and forth moments. I think the end in this game was pretty dramatic. I mean, tying it up, and you knew I was watching the game with a bunch of Eagles fans. And unfortunately for them, I even said, I think the Chiefs got the ball back with 5:15 left. I'm like, that Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they are going to call an offense to just try to go like 50 yards in 5 minutes. They don't want to get a touchdown, right? They want to go as far as they can, but with only 7 yards of play. So they can milk that clock and basically walk it off 38-35. So that
you called that.
Well, I'm just like, the goal is to be like, you don't want to break off 40 yards on the first play, right? Because now it's okay. Now we got to make the extra point. Even if we score, the Eagles can go down and score. Knowing Sirianni, man, he could go down if they're down 42-35. Dude could go for 2. You never know. You may take the ball out of your hands, and you didn't do anything wrong other than you went right down the field too fast. So that's why the penalty was so big, is it allowed them to manipulate the time. Because that Mahomes scramble, he went too far on that, man. He went like 20-plus yards on that scramble. I'm like, dude, he ran too far. Their Eagles are going to get the ball back. And then the penalty negated all of that.
I was hoping you wouldn't mention the goddamn penalty. God damn it. I just don't want the referees to decide the outcome. I didn't like it against the Bengals, and I didn't like it against the Eagles, unless it's affecting a play in an undisputable way, keep your flag in your pocket. Don't make it about you. If it's happening out of bounds, if it's in any way questionable or subjective, just say, hey, not right now. Under 5 minutes to go, just not right now, unless the guy has to basically be tackled to the ground and have like turf shoved in his face to call a flag under 5 minutes to go. This is how it should be, and I have a feeling this is a breaking point for the NFL, and that they will change the general approach of the referees under 5 minutes. I hope so. That's all they need to do. And I also think there's a interesting rule that they could implement, which is every coach has one penalty override. It's not a review, because they'll always just say, yeah, they've tried this in other sports. Yeah, there's enough evidence that we're not going to override our own referees. We're not going to, make them lose face. One referee is not going to make another referee lose face. That's not going to happen, right? Even though you say, oh, they're unbiased in the NFL headquarters where they're going to review the play. No. It's not unbiased. So to resolve for that issue, you just give the coach a full-blown flag override. One flag override a game. So they'll hold on to it. They'll add strategy to the game. And then under 5 minutes is typically when it would be used, and it would resolve this issue. And then it would always be this thing in the back of your mind. Are they going to throw the purple flag? Right? They always have the purple flag and the red flag. I mean, I'm now making it complicated, but I think I always like that level of strategy where it's like, okay, when would you possibly throw this? Right? Or a big play, like a big pass interference in the second quarter, you going to potentially waste it then? It's a huge play. You could waste it, but you might need it in the fourth quarter. I like that level of strategy. I like anything to add those layers, but then also potentially solve for these dilemmas that happen in the fourth quarter. I think that would be cool.
I mean, that's some galaxy brain shit, because I'm just thinking of scenarios where, I mean, what are you allowed to do? Commit a purposeful penalty on a walk-off play at the end and go, no, didn't count. Do you get the result of the play? There's a play, if it's a long pass interference where you break up the pass, but you also interfere, is it just an incomplete pass, or does the play get played
Override,
over?
Incomplete, done, game over.
So you're saying that Joseph Asai could have thrown Patrick Mahomes out of bounds 10 yards late, slammed him into the bench, and gone, had no penalty, right?
Okay, maybe we have one caveat. Okay, now layers of complexity. Shit, Scott. Okay, damn it. Yes, layers of complexity. It can't be to the level of a personal foul. Anything under a personal foul. It can't be if they deem it a personal foul, that it was intentional, sort of targeting on a pass interference. I mean, no fucking way. Okay, you can't override that. But if it's clearly the guy raked his arms, 2 seconds before the ball arrived, too bad.
Why don't we compromise and make it one of those flags that is not reviewable? The illegal contacts, something like that, where they can't even go back and look at it. If it's something that's reviewable, maybe something like that we don't allow the team to take away, because it already should be either reviewed or not reviewed, or you have the challenge rules that would still apply. So you have to use a challenge if you actually want it to be reviewed. But how frustrating is it when there's a turnover and they blow it dead, but the guy clearly fumbled, right? Those kind of flags, I think, are the ones where it's like, okay, everyone can see it was wrong, but there's a rule that says we can't review it.
Override.
So one of those that's like not reviewable by the booth, even with a challenge or under 2 minutes, that's the compromise. That's it.
Override, dude. Yep. All right, so now the question is, how much money did Miles Sanders cost himself with those playoff games where he underperformed game after game after game, and then basically Gainwell was the go-to running back in the Super Bowl?
You know what? This might be a little bit of a controversial take. I don't think he cost him that much money, only because I don't think he was going to make a lot of money to begin with.
That's right.
I think we're going to see this running back class. I mean, there's a lot of – right now I was just looking the other day. So 15 of the top 60 running backs in terms of Dynasty ADP are free agents. But I'm looking at most of those names, the Miles Sanders, the Damian Harrises, the Devin Singletaries. I think those guys are in for a rude awakening.
Well, there's just too many of them.
Right,
Kareem
they go
Hunt.
out to the open market. And
what about Kareem Hunt?
Kareem Hunt. I mean, there's too many of them for not enough jobs. And I don't think it's even that there's enough jobs. There's plenty of teams that need depth and need running backs. But there's alternate places they can get them. They can get them cheaper. They can get them in the draft. So I think you're going to see a lot of these guys that we quote unquote value for Dynasty. They're going to go to free agency expecting, let's just say the Chase Edmonds deal from last year. 2-year, $12 million, something decent. Here, Miles Sanders, we'll give you a 1-year, $3 million deal. You can come in and compete with, Zach Charbonnet as a further starting job.
Oh my God. That would be really, that would be
would
difficult
that shock
to
you,
swallow. Though? No, of course it wouldn't. Look at the class. That's without even talking about the elephant in the class, which is Saquon Barkley. He's not guaranteed to go back to New York. He probably would back, that's one of their franchise, face of the franchise type players. So you expect those types of players back. If you're a face of a franchise, they find a way to bring you back. I mean, Josh Jacobs is not the face of the Raiders. Okay, they're losing the face of the Raiders. The whole Raiders getting a facelift. Derek Carr, bye-bye. But Saquon has to sign somewhere. Now, what if Saquon delays signing? What if Saquon's not happy with the offers he's getting, and then he holds up the entire class getting signed because everyone's waiting for that Saquon Barkley domino to fall before they go ahead and sign a running back? So like, well, we're waiting for Saquon to sign, then we'll figure it out. And then the running back agents are like, yeah, we got to wait for Saquon to set the market. So both sides, the front offices and the agents for the players, are like, we got to wait for Saquon's deal to come in. Saquon's deal gets delayed, then all this money is getting allocated to other positions, which will then further depress the running back contract values.
I think the bigger thing is March 8th. The Giants have the decision to make. Do they tag Saquon Barkley or do they tag Daniel Jones or do they not tag either one? If they tag Barkley, I mean, look no further. Look at the franchise tag values, and it's like $10.5 million for a running back. That just shows you where they stand relative to the rest of the league in terms of positions. But I'm kind of looking at that going, if he were to get tagged, that really did. You might not see anything happen before free agency. And I think another prediction that people aren't really talking about is you're going to have some teams that go, okay, we know we need a backup running back. We might need 2 running backs. We might need 3 running backs. And we don't really care which ones we get. We want to get ones that fit our team, that we know we can rely on them for certain things. Like I'm a Bengals fan. Everyone knows that. I wouldn't be shocked instead of them going, hey, Miles Sanders, hey, Damian Harris, like how much is it going to take to bring you in? They're just going to go, well, we like Samaje Perine. We'll give him $3 million to come back. We like the guy. That's worth it. That's more worth it to us to bring back the guy we know versus going out there and hunting for another player. So I think we see some incumbents return. Would you be shocked if Devin Singletary returns to Buffalo?
Not at all. Because, hey, this is a replaceable position anyway. Might as well just bring back the guy that knows the system.
And they like him. And they don't like him at $8 million a year for multiple years, but they like him enough to go, hey, we'll bring you back. We'll give you another chance to take 12 touches a game. And so I think that happens more than we think. I think Damian Harris could go back to New England, which would just rile everybody up because they love Pierre Strong. They love Kevin Harris. They love Ramondre Stevenson.
Oh, Stevenson hype. Ooh.
Yeah, so I think some of these guys just return because it's like, man, if I'm not getting a multiple year, I think it's only like 5 running backs a year get more than 1-year deals. And we know who those are going to be. It's probably going to be maybe David Montgomery, maybe Josh Jacobs, Saquon. Like, that's it. Some of these other guys are not going to get multi-year deals. So they may just go back to their old teams, and we don't have the shakeup at running back that everyone thinks we're going to.
Miles Sanders could get nothing. It could be wow, and it wouldn't have mattered. Like even if he had performed well in the playoffs, maybe that the league has decided that Miles Sanders isn't much above replacement anyway, especially because he gives you nothing in the passing game. That makes sense. Kenny Gainwell, on the other hand, is heavily used in the passing game, super efficient. His role expanded in the playoffs and just kept expanding right through the Super Bowl. So I think he's earned the starting role, hasn't he?
I wouldn't say he's earned the starting role, but I was looking at some running back data, and currently in the NFL, active right now, Kenneth Gainwell is 6th in fantasy points per opportunity in the whole league, and everyone else that's around him other than Cordero Patterson, who would have guessed that. But he's up there with Austin Eckler, J.K. Dobbins, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard. Those are some of the other guys in the top 12. So I think he is what he is. He is a 35% of a backfield running back, but efficient offense. If he can just snag, a couple targets a game, like he's 53% of his touches in his career have been either targets or receptions. So like he's getting what you want. I don't even care about the carries. If he can give me 10 touches a game, you can bank on him probably for, I call him spot starts. I don't care if he's a bell cow. Give me enough running backs that can fire on a week-to-week basis.
In that offense, yeah.
Yeah, he's certainly one of those that you can probably plug in as a top 30, top 36 running back with the potential of some big weeks. So, yeah, he's definitely taken a boost, but I don't think you ever expect him to get more than 10 to 12 touches a game. That's his sweet spot. So just take it for what it is. And if anyone's ever higher on him than that, then he becomes a sell.
He becomes a sell. But just for the record, Memphis, 230 carries, 1,500 yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, but also 50 catches that year.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen small running backs that have speed and great hands in year 3 make a leap, getting a much higher rush share. Eckler being the best example. Guys drafted either undrafted or in day 3. I'm not gonna say Christian McCaffrey. That doesn't even count. But Eckler would be the best case scenario comp for Gainwell if he can continue with his strength and conditioning. And just like Eckler is so obsessed with football, and when you see Nick Sirianni wearing a Kenny Gainwell t-shirt, that tells me that Kenny Gainwell is doing the right things off the field. He's doing the right things in the gym. He's doing the right things with the strength and conditioning coach. That could open up the possibility of, say, 12 to 15 touches a game. That's not out of the realm of possibility. And with the Eagles' offense, that's pretty appealing. He was the RB52 last year in a very limited role. He definitely disappointed, but now in best ball drafts, these early best ball drafts and in dynasty startups, he's the perfect late round running back. I can't think of a better late round running back in terms of a guy in that sweet spot, like you're saying. What is his skill set? What's his situation? Oh my God, bullseye.
Yeah, I think you can probably, depending on what the new offense looks like, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much changes with their offensive coordinator leaving, but probably want Jalen Hurts to target the running backs a little bit more. But I mean, again, he's gotten to this point where you couldn't have hoped for a better spot to be in year 3.
Yes.
As a 5th round pick.
Yep.
There's a lot of 5th round picks that have looked similar to him profile wise, and then they just never fire. Like Chase Edmonds, I thought was really, really good. And then until he wasn't. Then you start looking a little bit deeper into how, what he did with all of his touches in his career. And you're like, yeah, this guy's probably not that efficient. So I think if you can prove efficiency early on, that teams are looking at this kind of stuff and they're going to go, okay, yeah, this guy, every time we give him the ball, we're getting 15% more than when we give the other guys the ball. So let's slowly ramp it up until we hit that sweet spot. It's kind of like a quarterback, right? Like there's only certain quarterbacks that you can throw the ball 650 times and they maintain their efficiency. You take a guy like Ryan Tannehill, you bump his attempts up to 550, 600, he's bad. You put him at 500, 475, on paper, his efficiency is elite. So I think it's finding that sweet spot for these guys and kind of pushing it until the bubble pops and then you pull back. But you don't want the bubble to pop to where you ruin the guy.
I just realized the comp that you explained perfectly, not Austin Eckler. The guy you just described was Aaron Jones.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You just described Aaron Jones. So if you're looking for the next Aaron Jones in year 3, making a leap where the touches get dialed up, Kenny Gainwell is your guy. Now, also in the Super Bowl, we had a pending free agent, JuJu Smith-Schuster. I think he earned a return to Kansas City, didn't he?
Man.
No?
I think he earned the return to KC because he wants to be in KC, and I think they want him there. And more importantly, I think they're going to want him there at the price point that he'd be willing to accept to be there. So it's a long answer, but I do think with the current wide receiver market, even though it's a really weak free agent class, I think he knows where his bread's buttered best, and it's probably KC. So I do think he ends up taking Allen Robinson got 3-year, $45 million. I think something like that. If he could get that, I think he'd be happy just to kind of sign away the rest of his prime in Kansas City versus going to the market and seeing if he can get more. Because we have to remember, he's hit the open market twice already.
He tried it out.
And we've seen what the other teams in the league view. I mean,
he's been humbled, man.
He was on the open market the same year Nelson Aguilar and Corey Davis got $12+ million a year. So, I mean, just looking at those, I think his smart bet is, what are you going to offer me, KC? And if it's a multiple-year deal with decent guaranteed money, I'm playing with Mahomes, especially if I'm playing next to Kelsey. I basically can play a hybrid, tight end slot receiver role, and I'm limited, but I'm going to be used to my max capacity. So I think he's definitely going back, especially after the Super Bowl, especially after them winning and him having a pretty good game. And honestly, it's funny at the end, he could have been the hero of that Super Bowl. That was Mahomes' worst throw, was on the hold. JuJu had Bradbury beat, and Mahomes overthrew it by 8 yards. But that could have been JuJu Smith-Schuster catching the game-winning touchdown. So, yeah, I think he's back.
Yeah, I mean, he gets no respect from defenders, right? He's not a great separator. But, I mean, because Mahomes is so accurate in his passes to JuJu, the target accuracy, 8.2 on PlayerProfiler, when Mahomes targets JuJu Smith-Schuster, is top 3 in the NFL, and therefore JuJu's yards per route run, his yards per target, both in the top 30, not exceptional. None of his efficiency metrics are exceptional, but when you do factor in the Mahomes accuracy, some of these get boosted up, right? And he did give you close to 500 yards after the catch. And that's always been his best strength, is the yards after the catch, and he's pretty reliable hands, only 3 drops last year. Just a nice, reliable slot receiver. But the NFL doesn't value that guy. The NFL is going to value guys with explosiveness more. You hit the open market, a guy like Chark, a guy like Campbell are going to get more money than a guy like JuJu every time, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at somebody like Jacoby Myers. Historically, he's a really, really efficient receiver. You put him in Kansas City and you're saying he can't do what JuJu's doing? I'm sure he probably can.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So it's really just about, that's why I don't think he hits the market, because he would get humbled a third time and he go, wow, I can't get more money than Paris Campbell or DJ Chark or Jacoby Myers. So, yeah, I think he re-ups, but just be careful in Dynasty valuing guys strictly because of their situations, Like, that's something we do a lot of times with receivers. We make if the first argument you're going to make for a player is he's tied to this quarterback or they don't have anybody else to throw to, that's usually a bad bet, because that can turn on a dime and then you have no floor. You have no governor. It's just the rug got pulled out from under you. But yeah, he's going back to KC.
Do you know the best example of this ever? What you're just talking about, the danger of centralizing your argument around the situation as opposed to the player themselves?
I can think of a lot of them, but what you got?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, that's fair.
That was the quintessential example of what we're talking about, where he was not special at any point. He was a cog in a machine at LSU, ends up going to the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense, but as a replacement level talent, a guy that's small and slow, we thought was a slicker receiver than he actually turned out to be. Like, he's not even as good as I thought he would be, and I was as low as anybody on him. And that's the danger. Whereas a guy like Jonathan Taylor, he is going to produce no matter where he ends up, because he was one of the more prolific rushers in college football history through 3 seasons. And the idea that you would draft Edwards-Helaire over a Taylor was crazy. I mean, the NFL did it, so the NFL is crazy, just like Dynasty leaguers are crazy. But oftentimes, you're following the cues from the NFL, like, oh, this guy has a draft capital, this guy doesn't have as much draft capital, I'm going to go with this guy. And then just sort of drafting off the NFL decision-making instead of making your own decisions as a Dynasty gamer.
Yeah, I think that's it's important, especially in the offseason when you have a lot more time to kind of just look back at historical data and kind of I don't even want to say recalibrate, but kind of slot all players back into like a level playing field and then start breaking the ties based on situation, based on the efficiency of the team, all those other things that we typically get way too ingrained in during the season. Because in the season, things are moving so fast. Like you got to adjust on the fly. Injuries can happen. Things can happen week to week where you go, okay, I got to move the needle quick. That's the new Dynasty game. I don't know if you've kind of noticed it this past year, but people are so reactionary now. It's like in a 2-week span, you can do a 180 on a player, on a team, on a situation. So I like to use the offseason to really kind of recalibrate where I stand on basically every player. And then you start factoring in some of the other things that are going to adjust the sliders up and down. So the quarterback, the efficiency of the offense, the pace of play, like all of those things. So you kind of have a pulse on where everybody stands if all else is equal. But we know all else isn't equal. We know all else, when JuJu has Patrick Mahomes, he could go and have Davis Mills. It's not equal. So I think just having to recalibrate that during the offseason is the best part.
I mean, he had Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. JuJu Smith-Schuster posted a grand total of 11.6 fantasy points per game in full PPR. So that's not moving the needle at all.
17.1% target share. So just pedestrian, like
what are you doing? You're not getting anything from that guy.
No, I think he is what he is. I call it the term I've branded myself has been the term the threshold receiver, meaning like he is a startable receiver in a format where, let's say, you have to start 10 players, right? 3 receivers and a flex, 3 receivers and 2 flexes. But that's all he is. You could literally insert 15, 20, 25, 30 other players into the same range. So then when you identify that you're in that range, you just play the market. Someone probably prefers JuJu Smith-Schuster over many others in that range because of his name, because of his situation. But, I mean, you just hit the reality. If you look at his numbers the last couple of years, even if you give him credit for, like, some of the time that he's missed or some of the unfortunate situations he's been in, he's had a couple games where he's left due to injury. Like, okay, sometimes that impacts the total numbers. But, yeah, he is a low-end threshold receiver that you can start, but you don't want to start, and I'd much rather flip for another player that people aren't putting in that range.
And then you can just play Isaiah Hodgins.
Yeah, there's a ton. You can literally go down the line, and I can go, okay, these guys are back-to-back. Which one would you prefer? And most likely, your answer is going to be the guy that has Patrick Mahomes, but the reality is the ending production isn't going to be that much different. So Isaiah Hodgins, another one like Romeo Dobbs is one where people are going to go, he's completely cooked when Rodgers leaves. But he's probably in that same range. He's not great, but he's not bad enough to where he's not relevant. So, like, who would you prefer?
I would prefer JuJu. I think that if Romeo Dobbs became JuJu Smith-Schuster, that would be his absolute ceiling outcome.
I prefer JuJu over Romeo Dobbs, but what I would rather do is I'd prefer Romeo Dobbs and you give me, a couple second-round picks on top of it or something like
that.
Yes.
Bring those second-round picks. Those second-round picks. I mean, right now I am trying everything I can to get as many picks as possible because there's this clear value accumulation that happens with picks right up until your rookie draft itself. And then once these picks become tangible players that have been drafted by specific teams that people can put a value on, suddenly that pick becomes a lot more valuable. So if you can get as many picks as you can in February and then flip them during your rookie draft and you start the cycle all over again, get a bunch of picks in 2024, get a couple players, and the next thing you know, that's how you have a war chest in a couple years.
Yeah, exactly.
But you got to start now trying to get picks. I see a lot of people trying to get picks from me, and I'm just like, now ain't the time, baby.
Well, I think here's the thing that a lot of Dynasty players miss too, is I call today or this period before we get to the draft or even through free agency, it's liquidation season. And that doesn't mean when you're selling a player, you're selling high, right? But the intrinsic value of getting a pick for a player in one of these nondescript ranges, so selling a wide receiver 40 for a second, selling running back 25 for a second, like those types of moves, sure, during the season, you're going to go, I need production. But what can you usually do during the season if you're willing to trade picks? buy production. You're willing to, you can buy stuff right now that you can use today, and then it's going to expire. So like the extra value of, I see people putting up trade blocks and they want 2 seconds for somebody like Tyler Lockett. Really, it's probably 1 second, because the value of the pick in February is more than what the value of the pick is in October or November. Because then it's only what you buy with it right then. So they know you want to spend it.
That pick is going up. That pick is going up in value, and B, Tyler Lockett is at risk of the NFL draft adding more target competition.
And how many times have you been in a rookie draft and you want to move around the board? How often does your Tyler Lockett help you move around the board?
Rarely,
because you're subject to the person you're trading with, for some reason, has to have an affinity for one single player. If I have 3 or 4 picks and they're kind of scattered across, the first, second, third round, I have a much better shot of going, okay, I have a target, but I have the flexibility. I'm the guy that has the more flexible currency, right? It's like going to, you're going to a place that takes 3 different types of currencies. You have all 3 versus the guy that only has 1. So I think it's an easy analogy, but it literally is liquidation season, to where I see a lot of people trying to sell stuff for too much, when really the move is just to sell at cost, because you're getting the advantage just by holding the pick.
Or below cost. Sell low.
Yeah.
You're clearing the decks,
cents on
man.
the dollar.
You got to clear the decks. You have to take some pain, and that pain might be a sell low situation. Clear the decks. Jason Allwine in the YouTube chat, our Jason Allwine from Player Profiler, says that JuJu Smith-Schuster is a decent PPR receiver. Thank you, Jason. That's literally what we just said, and you're proving our point. I don't know what you're adding to the conversation by saying that. I think that we can assume you're going to get better with your next comment. It's like literally what we just said, Jason. I think I think he likes JuJu, and he was trying his best to say something positive, and the best he could do was, he's pretty decent, I guess. It's like, oh. So I have 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions. It's the new segment, 10 burning questions of the Mind of Mansion show. For Scott Connor, there are 10 burning Dynasty questions coming up after this. Let's see if I'm muted or not. I don't think I'm muted. I came back. Do you hear me?
You're here.
So last time I did that, I was muted. And by the way, the PIP, the picture-in-picture, was way too big. So we're working on it, man. This is the first time that we've ever done an in-show native advertisement for the Epic Vision from our friends at Epson. So that went well. And I didn't get muted and ruin the show. So that was the most important thing.
Looks good. Those Epson TVs are pretty sweet.
They are. They're very sweet. The picture is better than I would have ever imagined. So that's a thing. That's a real thing that happened, and that's the television experience that I have. Now, 10 burning questions for Scott Connor. 10. So this is a pseudo rapid fire. It's not rapid fire. It's not. We have plenty of time. But this is 10. We're keeping it to 10. I actually have 12. I couldn't get it to. He knows. He got the email from me, and then about 5 minutes later, it was like 2 more questions. I was like, I can't. Like, I tried. I swear I tried, everybody. I tried to keep it at 10. You know I can't keep it at 10 questions. Okay, first question. And this is a big one. This one, no rapid fire on this question. We're going to dig into this. How do you value running backs versus wide receivers in Dynasty? This is a perpetual debate.
Yeah, it's a tough question only because I think every league is different. Every league is its own economy. So really, like, the first driver should be, how does the league value those in terms of assets you want to hold? But I'll just think of it this way. Running backs, we're starting to see the shift in running back landscapes to where they matter more when you have those ones that are making a difference, and they matter much less if you're just trying to get production. So I'm looking at running backs as like, this is the trip, this is the lavish vacation that I want to go on. I know it's not an investment, but I'm going to have fun. They're going to help me win. That's how I view running backs. Wide receivers are going to be more, not quite like draft picks, but kind of the same way. I need enough production, but there's also an investment factor that goes into receivers. So receivers are more like your long-term investments, some of your stocks that you're going to invest in, your 401k you're going to contribute to. So I think that's how I'm looking at it, but I'm also having to reconcile that with the fact that there are leagues where if everyone hates running backs, you should probably like them more. There's leagues when nobody likes running backs. You probably don't want to be chasing the hero RB or zero RB strategy in a league when 11 other people are doing it. So I do think it still comes down to not necessarily how the masses view it, but your league economy and how they view the two positions. But yeah, you're using wide receivers as investments for the most part, and running backs are, I need enough of them for my roster construction, and I'm completely fine taking losses on 90% of them as long as I get production out of them.
It sounds like you're more interested in the aging running backs and getting those last 2 seasons out of them at value than getting the Kenneth Walkers, the Breece Halls through the door early, because that's a very expensive proposition. And there's an investment component built into taking a running back and drafting them in a startup or trading for them or using your 101 or 102 on a running back. You're essentially admitting that that is a hybrid production asset plus investment asset. And so my sense from what you're saying is you'd rather say, hey, I can go get Austin Eckler and people are valuing him now outside the top 10 because he's 27. I think the next 2 years for Eckler will be great. I'm going to just enjoy that production knowing that his value is going down every day that goes by from here on. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because I think the current landscape, 5 years ago, running backs were viewed a lot differently. They were anchor pieces. They were building blocks. A running back that you had, if you were holding Ken Walker after his first year, you actually could get pretty significant equity if you were willing to move him. Now there's a lot of people that go, you know what, it's too risky. So I don't want to pay for production that I didn't get last year. He might only give us 3 or 4 years of production in his career. And I've already missed one by not having him last year. So why would I pay double what you paid to get him now when, especially the back end, this 2016, 2017 running back class, that a lot of them are still existing. They're not as good, but they're still here. So as long as you can still buy those guys and say, okay, all I'm doing is betting against Austin Eckler or Derrick Henry expiring, but also buying, knowing if it fits my roster construction, I don't care if I take an eventual 0 on that player. So I think the market is just ripe for that. Whereas if you're holding someone like Ken Walker, try to put him on the block and add him into a trade to get like an elite QB in superflex. He's not moving the needle like he did 5 years ago, even 3 years ago.
He's really not. And even in our Dynasty rankings, it's reflected in that. I've never seen 4 receivers be ranked ahead of the best running back in our overall rankings. But that's where we're at now. Like, Kenneth Walker does not have the value of an A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown put up 17 fantasy points a game, 17.6. CeeDee Lamb, 17.7. These were actually wide receiver 12, wide receiver 13 production 3 years ago, right? When wide receivers were at their peak at the position where you had a ton of receivers putting up 20 fantasy points per game. So not difference makers, but last year they were difference makers because the overall fantasy points scored across the board was down, but still no one's saying, oh, A.J. Brown won me my league, right? And yet we're talking about a top 4 asset in single quarterback leagues and a guy you would draft before you would even think about drafting a running back. That's where we're at now. Whereas, 5 years ago, the first 3 players would have been running backs.
And something that happened last year that's been trending this way the last couple of years is the high-end elite production has gone down, but the median production has actually gone up. There's more running backs that are concentrated, in that 13 to 16 point per game range. So it's not as hard to find guys in that range now, because a lot of that has to do with, opportunity shares being split between backfields. And also, you could have a guy that's in a 60-40 committee, but he spends 3 games during the year where the other guy's injured. So it's going to drag his point per game up a little bit to where all of a sudden, a guy that was technically a committee back is scoring 13 points per game. Now, you had to have the right roster construction to say, I started him in all of those weeks. That's the biggest thing. You got to hit right when you terms of putting those guys in the lineup. But in terms of paying for, the quote unquote bell cow that's giving you 16, 17 points per game, that's the worst investment in Dynasty, because you're paying up for the name. You're paying up for the guaranteed touches. But then you look at the production relative to the cost compared to the other positions, it's just not getting you there.
It's interesting when you look at a player like Rachaad White, where they were going in rookie drafts last year, right around George Pickens, right? And then you look up and these 2 guys have the same dynasty value. It's a year later and they have the same dynasty value. They put up similar, points per game, not counting the games where, Rachaad White was the starter, but similar production. You couldn't really use them, but they had upside. You almost had the same case to be made for them in DFS. It was very interesting. That's the type of running back that I'm targeting, as opposed to paying up for a Walker or a Hall. I'm going to be more likely to wait and go with a guy like Rachaad White, who also has a skill set that's similar to Walker and Hall, but much cheaper, much more uncertainty with his team. Right? So there's a lot of forces that aren't necessarily related to the player that could be dragging down his dynasty value. But even though he's 24 years old, he only has 1 year in the league, right? There's very little tread worn off those tires. So he's another guy I can see playing well into his 20s. So you have a little bit of investment value there, but mostly hey, Leonard Fournette could easily be gone this year. Do you think he's going to come back in Tampa, or do you think it's going to be Rachaad White?
I think there's a decent chance they cut Fournette looking at his contract. But I think to your point with Rachaad White, what is the narrative you'll normally hear when someone is talking about Rachaad White or Tyler Algier? It's they're going to get replaced, right? They're going to get replaced by this mythical bell cow running back that's going to come in and steal all of their work. But the reality is, the way the NFL is going, the more likely scenario is they add another similar player to their backfield, and now they're sharing a backfield with a similar player. And both of those players, depending on their profiles, depending on how they're used, are capable of giving you the 12 to 15 touches a game. They're capable of giving you the 15 points per game. But they could also slide down to 9, 10 points per game. But the point is, if you can play the volume game and you have the right roster construction to be able to take a shot on 5 Rachaad Whites and Tyler Algiers instead of 1 Kenneth Walker, that's where you take advantage of it. Because you're not really sure which one of those guys in that range are going to be the ones that stick and the ones that happen to be stuck with a guy that's just as good or better in the draft.
Oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this. Can I just tell you, looking at our dynasty rankings, we have lifetime value rating. If you add up Khalil Herbert, Kenny Gainwell, Tyler Algier, and Rachaad White, it comes close to equaling the value of Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, and the funny thing is you probably don't even have to – you probably can get more than those 4 for a single Ken Walker, or at least close. But I think the biggest
It's about
thing,
right. I mean, if I'm in my head thinking about, okay, if you're trading players, that's about right. That's about right. But typically what would happen is the person with Kenneth Walker is like, I'm not doing that. Kenneth Walker is too I'm not doing, quality for your quantity. No way. I need a stud coming back. This is ridiculous.
Well,
I need a stud coming back. You're not giving me enough. And it's like, well, technically I'm giving you a lot.
the problem is if, let's say, we're in a league where there's 25-man rosters and there's 10 starters, you need to have the right build to be able to accept that trade 4-for-1, right? Like, you probably are going, if I'm taking the 4 shots for the 1 elite running back, I need to have locked in stud tight end. I need to have a couple locked in quarterbacks. I need to have really efficient higher end receivers. I don't want to be playing the game where I'm platooning 8-9 different receivers, like I want to have everywhere else slimmed down so I can absorb taking on 4 players, trading away 1. I think that's what people miss a lot of times. Of course, in a vacuum, you're not going to do that trade, but in a deeper league where you have a ton of roster spots, you're more apt to do it because I can roster construct around it. So I think that's the biggest thing. On paper, a 4-for-1 typically is not going to be advantageous to the team getting 4 if it's equal, because the other person's getting 3 free roster spots.
That's right. And it can't be equal. That is an overpay. That would be an overpay when you factor in the roster spots. That's when it equals out.
Yes,
but that would be an overpay. But you wouldn't do it if you were in a league with like 22, 23 roster spots, because the replacement value of guys you could pick up is too close to I don't want to say Kenneth Gainwell because I think at least Algier.
There would be comparable running backs that
at least Algier there could be comparable running backs on the waiver wire for sure. I can't put Kenny in that spot. But 30, right? If you're now anyone that's been in a 30-player per team dynasty league knows just how impossible it is to find. I mean, when a Jeff Wilson comes available in leagues like that, I mean, it is a rush to get that guy. And you're probably not even going to get him. You're probably going to lose your fab bid. That's when a guy like having a Khalil Herbert takes on a lot more value, when you juice up the number of roster spots and the waiver wire becomes pretty barren all the time.
Yeah, that's probably the most fundamental thing you should do when you join a new league is kind of calculate the value of a roster spot relative to the number of starters that you have. Like if it's a 9 starters, 20-man rosters, that is totally different math than if it's 12 starters, 32-man rosters. Like really understand the value of a roster spot. And then what did we talk about earlier? Liquidating players for picks, right? How many times have you traded a player for a pick and then you go, damn, I'm eyeing that guy on the waiver wire I can pick up, and I feel real good about that pickup off the waiver wire. Like a lot of times what you're getting off the waiver wire is another 10, 20, 30% what you're adding into the deal because you freed up the roster spot. In a 22, 23, 25-man roster league, like I'm looking at the waiver wire going, dude, there's 10, 15 profiles I want to go pick up. But I can't do it if I'm holding all my roster spots in the forms of, the Tyler Lockett's of the world. So that's the biggest thing you can do right now, especially shallower leagues. Like, how do you liquidate, get draft capital, and go add other bodies off the waiver wire?
Churn. That's why in the Dynasty Dominator app, we have the settings for you to enter the total number of players per team, the number of teams in the league. And then what that does is that actually calculates the value of an empty roster spot. Because when we did our trade analyzer for the Dynasty Dominator app, the first edition, it did not show the value of the empty roster spot. So we had all these complaints. They're like, this is not adding up, man. This is not what? It's not adding up. I did the math. It's not adding up. And I'm like, but there's an empty roster spot. So there's a bonus that you're getting by shedding extra players in the deal. And it's like, well, and then we had to add a little empty roster spot with the value of it so that people could do the math in their head and they wouldn't think that the app was broken. That's just a funny thing that happened. I didn't even think of that. I was like, it's self-evident that we would give you a bonus.
Well, people don't think about
freeing up
that.
Roster space, but they didn't think about that. And I was like, okay, so we'll actually do the math right there and we'll put the empty roster spot there because it's like a player. It's even better than a player, actually, because it gives you flexibility to kind of do different things. You have a couple extra roster spots between now and the draft, and it gives you flexibility to kind of make some moves. I think that's what you're also talking about. You're not just talking about optimizing value. You're talking about increasing your flexibility to give you the opportunity to accept some trade or to propose some trades that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Yeah, the shallower the league, the more important the positional advantage is. And I think a lot of time that gets lost when someone just gives you a trade and there's no context to it. A shallower league with lesser roster spots, you're always going to kind of prefer the positional advantage because what you're going to be able to replace if you have an injury or what you're going to be able to replace if you free up roster spots is much better. I think that's a big thing people don't calculate. So that's why a lot of trade calculators and even just looking at tiers of players can get lost. If we're talking about a shallow league, a tier can move. We talked about JuJu earlier, right? There's probably leagues where JuJu is outside of the tier of even startable range. There's some leagues where he's well within that.
There's some leagues where he's very valuable. We start 5 receivers.
Boom. In that
very
format,
important.
You would be more apt to take volume in the JuJu range and not really care who you have. In a league where you can only start up to 3 receivers, I don't even want him because even if he's wide receiver 35, I'm still on the very low end of what the rest of the league relative to me is playing. So, yeah, that calculation matters a lot. People just miss it in Dynasty for the most part. They don't even think about it. They just look at player names.
I think that this year is going to be a good year to target running backs in the second round, in the third round. Typically, those are slots where I would be targeting wide receiver. Remember the T. Higgins year where T. Higgins was like the 202? Like there were some years where you wanted Higgins, Pittman, those kind of players in the second round all day. This year is interesting, and Johannes in the chat just nailed it. This is a great year to fill up on running backs because there's a lot of gems. There's guys coming out early like Kendre Miller, but then there's also a bunch of guys like, say, Roschon Johnson, who's going to test incredibly, and everyone's going to have to kind of a come-to-Jesus moment on and figure out where they're at with Roschon because they don't have the production to fall back on, but he's going to be a true size speed specimen. And as you can go down the board, there's even more running backs than that are. I mean, look at Zach Charbonnet's all-purpose profile. His production profile was extraordinary, even though he was forced to go back, and that's a red flag. But you go down the board, this could be a year more similar to last year where it's actually the first round where you want to get your wide receiver, and then you can pile up running backs as opposed to, say, 3 years ago when the move was get your anchor running back in the first round, and there's going to be great value at wide receiver in rounds 2, 3, 4. That's how I see the 2023 draft class playing out, and my strategy most likely in the 2023 rookie drafts.
I mean, it's like what we were talking about earlier. Like the running back, the elite running backs are starting to kind of die out a little bit, but this mid-tier range where you're just getting startable production, there's a ton of them in this year's draft. And I think a lot of people have tagged this class now as being a little disappointing, but I think relative to what the Dynasty landscape looks right now, I'm looking at this class going, let's just take these 3 names, Tyler Algier, Rachaad White, Dameon Pierce. They went in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round respectively last year. You can almost take this class and triple it. Like there's the potential to have a dozen running backs that go between round 3, mid-round 5 that we go, okay, they're a landing spot and the right usage away from being in the Tyler Algier, Rachaad White range. So I want to take as many bites of that apple as I can.
Yeah. I mean, the perfect guy for that, the guy that comps to Kenny Gainwell is Tajay Spears from Tulane.
Yeah, you got Tajay Spears, Kenny McIntosh, Israel Abinaconda, Zach Evans, Sean Tucker. You already mentioned 3 or 4 others.
Eric Gray.
Eric Gray is another one. I'm going, man, there's some guys that we haven't really talked about. A couple guys not even at the combine where I'm sitting there going, okay, I know I'm going to pick this guy up off waivers because there's a good chance that he makes a roster at least. So it's just look at this and you go, man, this is a running back class. And Dane Brugler said it. Daniel Jeremiah said it. And I think people take what they said. Jeremiah specifically said there are starters all over the draft at running back. But when I think we think starters, we think like Derrick Henry starter. Really when a team sees a starter, they go, Miles Sanders is a starter. Kenneth Gainwell's also a starter.
He is.
So it comes in many forms. But I think what they're saying is expect 10 or more, maybe up to 20 running backs in this class we look up in the preseason and go, that guy has a legit chance to have a role right away. And the way I'm going to play that is just take as many shots as I can. Give me all the second-round picks, all the third-round picks. Hell, there's going to be fourth-round picks where people go, that guy got fifth-round draft capital, but I don't like his landing spot. Like, okay, I'll pick him up because it just adds to my stable, and the more roster spots I have, the more you can exploit it.
Spears had 1,581 yards and 21 touchdowns rushing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even his strength. That's Gainwell. That's Gainwell, man. Totally. 100%.
But it's going to get higher draft capital. Probably going to get
fourth round.
Yeah, I think he could go in late day 2, third round.
He could be. Yeah, he could be. I think the range is from guys that really wowed at the Senior Bowl, especially in the passing game. You had early third round Antonio Gibson, and you have Dameon Pierce wowed at the Senior Bowl, but more as a runner, early fourth round. So I think Spears could fall into that Gibson to Pierce zone because he really brings the receiving skills to the table.
I won't be shocked if we only see 3 running backs go in the first 2 rounds. So you got Bijan, you got Gibbs, and I got A-Chain. That's it. And then it's just from picks 64 to 150, there could be 15 running backs drafted. And we're going, what do I do with 6 picks of draft capital separates this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy? What the hell do I do? So I think it is important to figure out in that range who you like and who you don't, who you're going to fade because the community loves and you might not particularly like. Like, I'm not at all a fan of Zach Evans, but I know the community loves Zach Evans. So he's going to be one of those where, like, I'm probably going to have him outside the top 10. Other people are going to have him, especially if he goes on the higher end, like early round 4, something like that. People are going to have him way higher. So you kind of got to you just got to know how you're going to play it because drafts are going to come on fast, and it's not going to be obvious with draft capital and landing spot how to play it. You got to know who you like.
Didn't Kendre Miller force him to transfer?
He did.
What are we talking about here? Kendre Miller decided to come out early. A lot of running backs are not coming out early. Kendre Miller's 20. And if he runs fast, that would be your other potential second rounder.
Potentially, yeah. Him and I think him, Charbonnet, and Tucker are the 3 that have a outside shot of going round 2. But I do think the NFL is going to see this and go, we're going to play a game of chicken. I don't want to be the guy that drafts a running back in the second, you know? And I think the other thing is, you mentioned Tyjae Spears. Someone is going to look at Tyjae Spears and Zach Charbonnet. They both say running back next to their name, correct? But they're not the same. You know, an NFL team is going to look at Devon A-Chain and Zach Evans as kind of 2 totally different positions. So sometimes it's just going to be like, what type of back do we need? You wouldn't expect the Eagles to draft Tyjae Spears, right?
They already have Gainwell. Right, but they could definitely use Miller.
But you would expect maybe a team like, say, Cincinnati that has no explosiveness to draft a guy like Tyjae Spears, right?
100%.
So the draft capital doesn't matter as much there because it may just be subject to what teams are picking in what slots. And you might have one bite at the apple, and it's a late third-round pick. So you're going to take the guy that fits what you need versus, well, you know, I didn't take Zach Evans because I don't need Zach Evans. So then he dropped a little bit further in the draft. So I don't think draft capital is going to be as predictive this year. It's just I'm looking more at, do they go in that sweet spot range? Are they a top 150 or better pick? Then I'm interested in all of them.
All right. We had 10 burning questions.
That's one.
They needed to be discussed with some sort of efficiency in order to get through all 10. We are officially through 1, so we are going to speed up. We have to. Looking at the clock, we're going to have to speed up, or else it's going to be a 5-hour show. We extrapolate. This is my primary burning question for you, me personally, because I'm in a lot of superflex drafts. Walk us through your ideal superflex draft, thinking about roster construction all along the way.
So in efforts to keep it brief, I will say I will be releasing a podcast on Destination Devi talking about this very soon.
Perfect.
So tune into that. You'll basically get like an hour of me going through each round. But Right now, let's assume we're talking a 12-team league. We'll say 30-man rosters, 10 starters. You're pretty standard. No other crazy scoring or weird formatting. None of these Matt Kelly 5-receiver leagues. None of those. So here's what I'm doing. I'm trying to trade up in the first round. I don't care what I have to take. I'm trying to get two top 9 quarterbacks.
Oh.
Full stop. Anything to get 2 top 9 quarterbacks with 2 rules. I never trade more startup picks than I get back. I don't trade my future first round picks. Do not break either of those rules. But if I offer my 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick to get a first, an 8th, and a 10th, don't care. Don't care about those mid-round picks, especially in February, because there's a lot of time before the season. So let me lock in 2 elite quarterbacks. That's step 1. Step 2, let's say I did that. Now I don't pick for a while, right? Because I traded away my 2nd, my 3rd, and my 4th. I'm looking at the board going, shit, I don't pick for another 50 picks. How do I build value on my team? Because now I have these 2 elite quarterbacks, but I don't have any running backs, no high-end receivers, no elite tight end. What do I do? So then I'm taking all of my other picks, my 5th rounder, my 6th rounder, my 7th rounder, any other pick that I can do a leverage trade. So can I trade my 5th, move back 3 or 4 rounds and pick up an extra 24 first? Same thing with my 6th. So can I leave this draft essentially with a couple future firsts, my 2 elite quarterbacks built, and then what am I going to do with all of those remaining picks I have, my 7th, my 8th, my 9th, my 10th, my multiple 8ths, my multiple 10ths, like all those picks I accumulated in a cluster? I'm taking as many shots as I can on some of the players we talked about. Guys that are in the nondescript range, going to build my right roster construction, heavy on running backs after I've tried to get as many of those threshold receivers as I can. But I have the insurance. I bought the insurance before I started my business because I have those extra firsts next year to help bail myself out if things go wrong. So that's how I'm doing it.
The insurance is the quarterbacks.
It's two facets. The structure of my team is built. Let's say I get Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Yeah. I don't even have to mess with that for a couple years at least. There's no risk at all.
Set it and forget it.
They're set. So I'm never really doing anything at quarterback except for extracting value. If I draft a 3rd or something like that, I'm just basically playing the market with my extra quarterbacks. But then I can basically take advantage of the fact we don't know a lot. This is more applicable to like a February or March startup than if you're doing a draft in August. In August, it's a lot harder because, you already know kind of what the season projection is going to look like. So I'm just taking as many shots as I can, but the key component is you got to build that extra value as well. You're giving yourself that extra insurance by getting a couple future firsts. So resist the temptation to draft the Ken Walker in the early 5th or wherever a player like that, resist. Trade out of those and try to do the 2-for-1 deals. So that's kind of how I would build it if I could. I'll do 12 rounds on the show, but that's in a nutshell what it looks like. I don't trade my future picks. I accumulate future picks. And I'm very agnostic in terms of what players I get in the middle rounds.
Yeah, it's a productive struggle. You're probably not going to win in year 1.
True, but here's the thing. We're basically taking on the fact that there's a lot of variance that can happen between now and the season. But part of the way you've built is if you find yourself, let's say you're 5th place, week 11 next year, right? Thanksgiving, you're in the playoff race. What do I have? Extra picks to throw around if I want.
If you want.
I've given myself an out. And you know what? If I fall out of it, I have a couple injuries. A couple of the players I take in the mid-rounds don't break right. All right, I'll focus on next year. And my team's already set up for that. But I have the ammo that I've built to make a run. And, the worst thing you can do is get in the playoffs and take a shot at winning. You may get lucky. Yeah, got to get there first.
Even with that structure, let's say I'm in the 12th, 13th round. I always remember, I go back and I love looking at past startups. And I love going back and looking at where players went and what ended up happening. And so many of the receivers that go in the double-digit rounds end up on the waiver wire are nothing. Zero, like nothing. You get nothing from this receiver. It's a projection. Who knows, right? N'Keal Harry, on and on and on, right? Okay, he had one bad year, but then the second year, someone's going to draft him, and hope that he can be Devontae Adams, and then it's never going to happen, right? In that spot, you can go get a Leonard Fournette, who's actually going to produce. And if he exceeds expectations, have a bit of a rejuvenated year, you could flip him if you're out of contention or use him. There's a lot more flexibility than after 3 weeks, this guy is clearly a dud receiver and has no value.
I think that's the
doesn't
biggest
have
thing.
the upside, doesn't have the investment component to it, right? But you're getting production that can actually help you be competitive and then give you a choice of what direction you want to go in November. That's why you might be the guy that steps into the breach, even though it looks like you're doing a rebuild. What the fuck is this guy doing? What the hell is Scott doing? He's clearly rebuilding. He's trading picks for future firsts. And then the next thing I know, he's drafting Ezekiel Elliott. What the fuck is this guy doing? And you're like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think the biggest point to what you just said was be careful what receivers you draft after that threshold that you've determined. So let's say it's top 50, top 60, whatever you're using. Once you go below that point, you're taking risk. You're taking
Jalen
risk.
Reagor could bounce back. He could be something.
That's a great example. It's buying into those guys, like buying into, I know this one probably hurts you a little bit, but buying into Jalen Tolbert. He's not even worth a roster spot at this point. I would much rather draft any running back on an NFL roster over him because, to your point, even if you're out of it, what are other people going to potentially be seeking from your team most likely when they need something during the season? It's going to be that Jamal Williams that's scoring 2 touchdowns a game. Like, that's going to be the guy people are going to go, hey, will you throw me that guy for a couple thirds, or will you throw me that guy for a second? Rarely are you going to be able to sell somebody on, your Josh Palmer because they need a wide receiver 6. They can find that. They probably already have a bunch of them on their team to begin with. So I think there's a lot of aspects that make this strategy good. It's not just the elite quarterbacks. It's all the stuff you do after that.
But Nico Collins is going to happen.
I like Nico.
I know. Alec Pierce, he's poised. They're gonna let Campbell walk. It's gonna be the Pierce show. If they get a quarterback,
they gotta throw it to somebody, right?
And he's actually good. And then you could definitely talk yourself into it. You could see this happening, and you're like, I don't want an old dusty running back. I want a little bit of excitement in my life. I want to bet on the possibility that Chase Claypool rediscovers the magic from his rookie season. I don't want some dusty running back, Scott. You see what I'm saying?
Trust me, I get it. People won't know what you're doing when you
it takes people they just can't understand the possibility that guy's going to be waiver wire fodder.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds crazy, but it's the league is so brutal to players that are not in a setup that don't set themselves up for success when they're young. And if you fail to build yourself up and to put in the work in those first few years, you set yourself back. Even if you have Chase Claypool's physical skills, imagine having Chase Claypool's physical skills. But if you're just interested in playing video games, the league is going to chew you up and spit you out. Yeah, it's crazy.
What's also going to happen is the league, there's a level of acceptance that a league is willing to tolerate with players when they're not making a lot of money, right? But then you go, well, Chase Claypool has still got to pay him. In this wide receiver market, you still got to pay him 12, 15, 18 million a year. Then the team is going, whoa, we'd rather just have that other guy. They can give us 80% of Chase Claypool at, 5% of the cost. That's where you get some risk when you get these guys that are hitting free agents. You've mentioned Paris Campbell a couple times. I like Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell's great, though, when he's on a rookie contract. When all of a sudden you got to pay him $10 million, you're going, man, there's probably a Paris Campbell in the draft I can find somewhere. Maybe we should use a pick on that guy.
Oh, yeah. So in my monologue before the show for the podcast, I mentioned Paris Campbell being a value, but I was specifically talking about best ball seasonal leagues with that Zay Jones corollary. Yeah. He's going to get paid. And this year, he's a good bet. But I'm not drafting much Paris Campbell or DJ Chark in a dynasty startup. It's likely a juice that's just not worth the squeeze. And I also want to mention that our superflex rankings are so skewed to quarterback, the elite quarterback, that we have 9 in the top 12. And I've had people email me that there's a bug in the system, that it's wrong, and that there must be something with the settings. And I'm like, well, are you in superflex? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's right. You should value Dak Prescott there. And they're like, that's crazy. And I'm like, you can just trust me, okay? NFL Man of the Year, age 29, Dallas Cowboy, cornerstone asset, franchise quarterback, Dak Prescott is someone you want to build around in Superflex. He's going to be there for the next 5 years. He's a guy that built a football field at his house and hosts all the receivers there for months at a time. That's the type of player that thrives for a long period of time in this league and is a set-it-and-forget-it quarterback. But I think some people are forgetting that Dak Prescott is a set-it-and-forget-it quarterback. So if there's all the guys that I'm thinking about, like we have Prescott ahead of Lamar Jackson in Dynasty. And I think that's fair. I think that's an interesting debate. When I look at our rankings, so much of it's chalk, but then, Prescott over Lamar is interesting.
Yeah, I think the key is what you just said, 9 of the top 12, 10 of the top 13, wherever you want to put it. But I think the idea is there's very few skill players where you're going to go, especially in a startup. The beauty of a startup is you can build your team the way that you want. Every one of your picks should play off the prior picks that you've made. So you're not stuck like with a trade market where you're going, well, I need X, but I can only acquire Y at the cost that I want to actually pay. Like you can build the way that you want. So it's really, I see people make mistakes in startup and they go, yeah, quarterbacks are too expensive. So I'm just going to draft skill players and then try to find my way at quarterback. But especially someone like me that plays in so many leagues, I don't have time to go every year. I'm going to try to hit on rookie quarterbacks and subject myself to that. And it's such a tough threshold to get to, just getting to like Daniel Jones, Tua Tagovailoa level. That's tough to get to for a rookie quarterback, let alone getting to Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson range. That's not a great bet. I'd rather just get them in the startup when I know they're right in front of me and it's the cheapest cost.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna figure it out, right? I'm gonna get creative. I'm gonna go Brock Purdy, right? I'm gonna wiggle my way through this, right? Just like someone that was wiggling their way through it with Davis Mills, and then the year before that, Gardner Minshew, and the year before that, 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 and the year before that.
And they're devastated every offseason when they lose Phillip Rivers or Drew Brees or Tom Brady, and they're going, man, that's a big loss. But I think the biggest factor for this discussion, too, is that if I have an elite quarterback, and this is why you do it in the startup, if I have 2 elite quarterbacks, the only deals I will consider for those players are ones where I'm pivoting within that elite quarterback tier.
Correct.
That's it. So like if I have Justin Herbert and Justin Fields, just those 2 for an example, they're not getting traded. Not really interested in a deal where you're sending me a couple first round picks and Jalen Waddle, or you know what I mean? Like the package doesn't interest me. Now, if you're going to send me an extra first to pivot down from Justin Fields to Dak Prescott or something,
that's
sure.
what I was just going to say. I was like, but Dak would be that. Would be the perfect guy that you'd like accept that deal as long as you were getting like a price. I was going to say what you said.
But if the team needs a quarterback, what do they most likely not already have? One of the guys to sell you in a pivot trade, right? They're the guy that doesn't even have one, and they're going, man, what do you want for Herbert? I'm going, like, shy of you giving me your entire team? Like 5 first-round picks in the form of a couple receivers and a couple picks, that isn't going to move the needle because it's good value, but it's breaking up my roster construction so much. You know how much work I have to do to get it back to that in the trade market? It's not worth my effort. So that's the other thing is quarterbacks are not hard to get. They're hard to get. The person with the elite quarterbacks is typically just not trading them.
Yeah, the best you can do is like a Kirk Cousins. That's the best you can hope for.
the very best. Like you're rarely
that's
are
the
you
top of the market.
Yeah. And when you make a deal like that, that is you're kind of selling your soul for the production Kirk Cousins gives you, because he's really giving you no rebound value. You're not selling him for more next year, even if he goes out and is QB 9. Like every year he's done that, and his value just remains. It is tied strictly to what is he producing. As soon as he doesn't produce, he's done.
I regret very few trades that I've done, but I did trade Kirk Cousins in a superflex league, and I do regret it. I should not have done it. Was it
I think he's done soon, or what was the justification to move him? Because he's one of those guys he's hard to trade.
Getting a future first. I also got Bateman and something else. Probably Gainwell. I don't know.
Probably.
But probably Gainwell. It was something else. It was that. It was three things. It was a future first. It was Bateman, and it was something else. And I was like, well, this is an overpay for Cousins. I'll don't love it, but I'll take it. I had Fields and a couple other quarterbacks, and I felt good about my quarterback situation. And then things kind of unraveled, and it wasn't good. It was a bad choice. And I listen, I believe in Bateman, and I'm sure whoever I drafted, I think I might have drafted Christian Watson with that pick, or I don't know, Christian Watson or Olave. I can't remember where that pick was exactly, because I drafted 2 receivers at least in that league, in that zone. So I'm probably going to be fine, but it's a struggle, man. Like another thing that you touched on is if you're in a lot of leagues, I'm less likely to do that deal because I know I'm setting myself up for a lot more work.
I'm with you, man.
It's true.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Is you probably had Kirk Cousins slotted into a specific role on your team, and it was already built. So as soon as I trade him, sure, I have all this money, but it's literally like getting paid double what you want for an item, but it's in a currency that you can't spend in that country you're in. So now you're like, damn, I got to go exchange it, which means I got to go to a place to, so it's, that there is a level of my analysis in Dynasty that comes from the fact that I'm doing a ton of stuff and I'm playing in so many leagues. It's impossible for me to just grind day to day in the same league. Like I'm lucky if I can give a league an hour a week, at most. So it's like, I got to know the form of how I want to build my team, because I don't have a lot of time to just go, well, I'm just going to blow it up with this trade. But man, look at all those first round picks that I got, because now I have to go spend a bunch of time getting it back to where I want to get it to.
It was nice to get Olave, though. It was nice. Felt real good.
Yeah, on paper, you look at that deal and you're like, oh, Olave, Bateman, maybe Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell.
Someone else. It was good. It was fine. It was a good job. Scott.
It's a good deal.
I fucked up.
No, you didn't. It's a good deal.
I didn't really. I don't know. So it's interesting that these top quarterbacks you're talking about, they're even surging in value in single quarterback leagues. Whereas it used to be that in a single quarterback league, it would be late round quarterback always. Now, the benefit of getting a Burrow, even in single quarterback, is starting to be more appreciated in Dynasty.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about earlier, is understanding the value of a roster spot and the positional advantage at those spots. And that's exactly what it is. Even in single quarterback where the scarcity isn't there, but you look at the above replacement number you're getting from one of the elite quarterbacks relative to the replacement value. Even if a team goes, you know what? Because I used to be this way. I don't play in any single quarterback leagues anymore. But when I did, I was always the one. I'll carry a Kirk Cousins, a Derek Carr, and a Jared Goff. I'll just platoon my way to the top, right? Until you realize there's 5 or 6 teams that it doesn't matter if you pick right or wrong most weeks. And that's the other problem, is you put yourself in a situation where you're trying to pick between 2 or 3 quarterbacks to platoon. But even when I pick right, I'm still not matching the elite guys anyway, which I know are spread out amongst 4 or 5 other teams. So you're kind of just settling for average, but you're also doing it at a spot where you could easily go and maybe get the positional advantage a little cheaper because it's a single quarterback league, right? So I do think in single quarterback, I'd rather just bite the bullet, take a value loss, lock in the Jalen Hurts or someone like that, and just worry about everything later. I can get that value back slowly, but I'd rather just bite the bullet and get the positional advantage.
Another burning question. What about the tight end position?
I think it's the same thing.
We haven't mentioned it.
It's the same thing as the quarterbacks. Now, that's different than how I evaluate tight ends. But I think the same thing applies, but on an even more scarce level, right? Like there's probably 5 or 6 elite tight ends in Dynasty. And even from a production perspective, after Kelsey, it pretty much falls off a cliff to the point where there's like the next tier. But I do think from a player evaluation standpoint, it's much different. I'm very, very much in line with if I even want to have a chance of breaking into that top 8 or better or so tight ends where I know it's a potential positional advantage, it's got to be somebody. I don't even care about draft capital, not necessarily care about that at all. It's all about athleticism. It's all about RAS score. It's not even about production. I'll go down for being very high on a player that I know your boy Cody was very high on. Charlie Kolar. You look at Charlie Kolar's profile and you go, he's one of the most athletic tight ends in the league. Then you look at his production profile and you go, dude, this guy was a dominant producer for 3 years in college. Then he gets to the NFL and Isaiah Likely's better than him. Isaiah Likely was a guy, not even athletic. So for tight ends, it's all about RAS score and stashing those guys, and then everything else is just paying for positional advantage when you can. That's my strategy is very simple. Those 2 factors.
Tight end just doesn't move the needle, man. I don't draft tight end early. I just don't. And so, our rankings are set up and our lifetime values are set up in a way that the elite tight ends just don't have the lifetime value that people want. They think that they should be higher, and then they're not, and sometimes maybe they get frustrated. They're asking, this doesn't make sense, da-da-da. And it's like, guys, this is set up so that you're not going to overpay for a tight end, okay? So just trust us on this one. Now, at wide receiver, I mentioned A.J. Brown at wide receiver 4, I think is consensus-ish. And you also think that the big 3 wide receivers, do you think there's any debate within the rankings of those 3, or is that like codified? Like Jefferson, Chase, Lamb. Have you seen any variance?
I think you're starting to see. I don't want to say people are a little back down on CeeDee Lamb, but I think there's a clear separation between him and Jefferson and Chase.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
then
it's really a big 2. Yeah.
It's a big 2, and then I think really what it is it's a big 2, and then you have a second tier of receivers that probably goes from like 3 to 10 to 12, and it's a mixture in there. It's a mixture in there of guys that have had historically really good usage. So somebody like CeeDee Lamb, almost 30% target share last year. Like he solidified that spot. But then you have other guys in there that are valued in that range. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, like those are like the it receivers. If you have one of those guys, it's the best time to have one because a lot of people in your league want him. Now, is Garrett Wilson really, is he deserving of wide receiver 5 in Dynasty? Probably not. But there's a big tier there where it's like, if I can get as many receivers in that tier, and it's probably not CeeDee Lamb or A.J. Brown, I probably are going to go after Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, like the cheaper versions of those ranges where there's a potential I could get a, top 12 season or better out of those guys. So I think it's just a big second tier. It's just I don't want to pay for the very top of that tier. I don't want to pay for A.J. Brown when I can get Devontae Smith half price.
The range between Wilson and Devontae Smith is very narrow.
Yeah.
Right? So put it this way. The range of lifetime value between A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson, right? The gap is wider than it is from Wilson all the way down to Devontae Smith, and that includes a whole bunch of other receivers like Metcalf and Waddle, and it's it's a cluster of dudes in that area, and the Garrett Wilson valuation is speculative, a lot more speculative than say the DK Metcalf valuation. But the upside is that he could break into that top 3. Metcalf is now 25. He's not going to be able to break into that top, but Wilson has the opportunity. Olave, to a lesser extent. It would be nice if there was a more certain quarterback situation. I think that most people are convinced that the Jets are going to definitely fix the quarterback position this offseason. Less certain, much less certain with New Orleans.
That's the tough part with Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, because all three of them had awesome rookie years. But you're just not sure what the offense is going to look like. So I just can't. We've been burned before on moving these guys up based on speculative usage up to, JuJu Smith-Schuster was a top 3 receiver in Dynasty at one point.
That's right. And Claypool was top 12 in some rank. Yeah. Not us, but I know because I thought he looked like a tight end at the Senior Bowl. But
but we've put DJ Moore into the top 5. We've put Chris Godwin into the top 5. And I think the takeaway is we've been burned more often than not by juicing these guys up in year 2 and year 3. We juiced Jalen Waddle up into the top 5. And reality, you take Jalen Waddle's rookie year away and you say, what does he look like with Tua and Tyreek Hill? He looks a lot more like the DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, right? Than he does wide receiver 4 or 5. So I think we're just guilty of moving these guys up because, well, Matt, they're young. They have to get Chris Olave.
The NFL took him over Penny Sewell.
Right. He has to get 20% better in his sophomore year and then 10% better again in his third year. And by year 4, he's going to be Jerry Rice. No. He's probably a really good receiver, but I think all of these guys kind of fit in a big tier where once they get into this tier, it's going to be really hard to ever push DK Metcalf out of the top 20. As long as he's playing and he's healthy. Like, he's probably going to always be in that range. But do I ever want to pay like top 5, top 6 receiver prices for a guy in this range? No. So I'm always going to play on the backside of this range. So this year, that's kind of fade A.J. Brown, fade CeeDee Lamb, fade Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Those are the 4 and probably Jalen Waddle. I saw him just go wide receiver 5 in a startup yesterday.
Oh, come on.
And I'm just shaking my head going, he's good, but are you really taking him 2 rounds ahead of Devontae Smith, 3-4 rounds ahead of DJ Moore, who I'm a big DJ Moore guy. If he ever were to get a similar quarterback situation that like Jalen Waddle had, he's probably pretty damn good. So there's a way to play. If I walk
away from a draft and my top 2 receivers are Godwin and DJ Moore, I'm very happy.
Agree.
I'm very happy. And I think that what you're saying is the arbitrage play there at receiver is you wait a round or 2, and instead of drafting A.J. Brown, you go Devontae Smith.
Yeah, because what would happen if kind of a guy like Chris Olave did what he did this year again? Where's he going to be next year?
Oh,
boy. Probably at the bottom of that tier, right?
Not good.
No, he's good. It's just he's going to probably be a tier down, and you're going to go, he didn't take the leap forward that I wanted. So he's probably the next DJ Moore. Oops. Why am I paying double the price to get him today just because he's young?
That's my worry. I'm certainly more certain that Garrett Wilson will take a next step in development this year than I am Chris Olave. It's what it is. And same with Drake London, because he got the massive target share as well.
To me, that's the one. Drake London is the one where if I had to bet at cost, he is the one where I'm like, all right, I'm going to take him.
Yeah.
I'm going to take him where he's going relative to where Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are going, because I feel like the community thinks he's maybe just like a half tier below those guys. Arguably, he's the best player of the 3.
Yeah. So we love Olave, okay? Love Olave. Still have him below Wilson and London. And that's just cold, hard, clinical analysis. It's, I love him, but I don't control what the computer system and Dario and Billy Muzio and all, this system that we have in place ends up spitting out. So sorry, I'm not sorry. Now, the RB1 is interesting. No one can agree on this, where everyone agrees, okay, it's Jefferson, maybe Chase, but almost always Jefferson. It's like some people think it's Jonathan Taylor. Some people think it's Kenneth Walker. Some people think are already just going straight to Breece Hall. Somebody, hey, Bijan. So I don't know. Could be any of those guys. They're all top 5 running backs. I'm not ready to put Breece Hall at RB1 until we see some positive reports about the knee. Is that fair, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen these guys come back from the ACL injuries slower than normal, and I don't want to invest in that, banking on it being the RB1 when it really can't go much higher than where you would be having it there when he comes back, right? Especially we already talked about the relative value of one of these elite running backs to quarterback, to wide receiver. So why even put him up there when you don't have to? Because even if he gets back up there, it's not going to cost you that much more to get in on Breece Hall.
That's right.
To answer your question, I think it's the 101 is the RB1 in Dynasty.
Yeah, Bijan.
That's everyone knows it's going to be Bijan, but if you have that 101 and you go, I'm building around an anchor running back, that's what I would prefer over Jonathan Taylor, over Breece Hall, over Ken Walker, over Travis Etienne, over all of them. Not even close.
You know what made me appreciate Bijan Robinson even more? Going to the Senior Bowl and seeing Roschon Johnson.
I was going to say I don't want to say he clowned your boy Roschon, but he literally kept him off the field. And then you're looking at him going, damn, that guy's good too.
I'm like, what the fuck? Not about Johnson. I'm like, how good must Bijan be?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, right? It was like a Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown situation. Where it's like unbelievable, right? So now, in this book, The Dynasty Dominator, that I wrote and is on Amazon, we talk about the age apex for the running back position being earlier than most people think. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that when a running back reaches age 24.5, they're halfway completed their fantasy production. They've produced 50% of their fantasy points have been scored by age 24.5. Considering that Rachaad White's about to turn 24.5, it sounds crazy. But it's just what happens because guess what? The best running backs come out a year early, like Saquon, and they do the vast majority of their production in their early 20s. That's when they deliver it. So think about Saquon Barkley's best year, his rookie year, right? That's just what it is. So when you have an opportunity to bring in an asset at age 20, that's 1, 2, 3 years, sometimes 4 years until they reach age 24.5. That's the math that you're doing when you're posting up Bijan at the RB1 spot. It's real.
No disagreements. I think that's the other thing I'll comment about that. When you're saying that, it makes sense to me. But then we look at this current market and we still see almost half the running backs that make up the top 25, 30 are going to be 27 or older going into the season. And so you almost look at those and you go, we're looking at a subset of outliers. To become an outlier, they had to be damn good to begin with. And what is that going to look like in a couple of years? Because one of my big predictions is that this is kind of being masked right now by the older running backs that are hanging around. But what does it look like in 5 years when all that goes away? And now we have very, very, very few prospects that come into the league that look like Bijan Robinson, that look like Jonathan Taylor, that look like Saquon Barkley. Like, guys just aren't built like that anymore. And nor should they, because what did you just say? What's the unfortunate reality about Bijan Robinson? The team's going to draft him probably in the first round. They're going to expect the most out of him for 4 years, and then they're going to go, sorry, bro, you're Josh Jacobs.
They're going to chew him up and spit him out.
Right. So he's probably sitting there going like, all right, I know I can probably dominate the league. But
that's right. The guys that come out when they're 23 don't get drafted until the third round. Mm-hmm. And they don't get fed until their second or third year. So those are the guys that are on the other side of the scale, mm-hmm. getting a lot of their production post Apex. Mm-hmm. But those were third round picks. Those were guys that were never going to give you the same number of fantasy points as the Saquon Barkleys. The best talents get used up quicker by the league It's the great paradox, and it's why we're looking at a guy like Austin Eckler. Why do you think he's so good at age 27? Because he was a lightly used race car for years. Right? Same with Aaron Jones. A lot of these guys, they were preserved. Whereas if Aaron Jones was a first-round pick, I don't know where he would be right now.
Yeah, and look at Barkley. We already talked about Barkley. This is his one bite at the apple right now, right?
It's such a crossroads for him.
This is his one choice. I mean, he's even said he wants to be paid like McCaffrey, 16 mil or so a year, wants a multi-year contract. This is his one shot. And think about how much he has put in, how much he's dealt with, and how much he's produced just to get to this point. That's depressing when you have guys like Christian Kirk getting $18 million a year. Someone like Bijan's looking at Barkley going, this guy is begging for a 3 or 4 year deal that's paying him $15+ million, and Jacoby Myers is going to get more than that.
He should be begging to go at pick 33 also.
Yeah, gets there quicker, right?
Yeah,
actually more leverage if you're not a first rounder for sure.
Get out. You don't want to go at pick 28. You want to go at pick 33. So we talked about some values right down the board. We talked about some older values like a Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott. They're the same age as guys that are a hell of a lot more expensive. Okay. Then you've got the Gainwells, the Algiers, the Khalil Herberts. Give us a couple more of those types of those types of running backs that are the values in that particular range.
So I'll throw out a couple because I think they're all over the map, but you're taking advantage of the fact that people are a little down on maybe their situation or how their season ended. A guy that I'm still going to go back to the well on, I'm still in on Rashad Penny. Only because you look historically at those per touch numbers, he's right up there with that elite group. He's in the top 11 right now. He's actually 11th in points per opportunity for his career. Now, you're going to sit here and go, well, when does he ever get those opportunities? He misses 60% of them, right? But again, what are we shooting for? We're shooting for usable weeks. So I think he's one of those guys, he just has to land somewhere, and I'm going to bank that when his usable week comes, I'm getting more out of him than a lot of other guys that are much, much lower on the totem pole. So that's one. We talked about what, Miles Sanders, Devin Singletary. Can I send Miles Sanders or Devin Singletary for Rashad Penny and a couple third-round picks so I can take a couple more bites at the apple to grab an Eric Gray, one of those types? Because honestly, you look at Rashad Penny compared to Miles Sanders, and Penny's had the better career. Maybe not total volume, but more efficient for sure. Yeah. So that's one.
Crazy efficient.
Yeah, very efficient. So that's one.
I have another one for you. Because you're taking the guy that's post-Apex. I have a pre-Apex guy for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Similar to Khalil Herbert, Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard is looking at being in line for the primary back role because Dante Foreman's gone. Could be back, but likely gone. His role continued to grow until it was parity with Foreman the last few weeks of the season. He was a former premium running back prospect, right? Put up a 2,000-yard season, tore his ACL, was then banished behind Christian McCaffrey. Then he emerges. He has the requisite size. He has certainly enough speed. He showed more explosiveness in college than he showed at the combine. Now you look up and he's being used as a satellite back plus. He's being used as a guy that is primarily active out of the backfield, but has the size to take on a bigger role if they decide to move on from Dante Foreman. Dante Foreman just doesn't fit with their long-term vision. They're rebuilding. Why would they bring back Foreman? It's possible. Like you said, a lot of these older running backs are going to look up after a few weeks of free agency and realize that no one's calling and just take whatever their current team is offering. So that's very possible with Foreman, but you're not going to pay anything for Chuba Hubbard, and you're going to get the most heavily discounted all-purpose skill set for a player who's really on schedule to be a primary back of any of the running backs in that zone other than maybe Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny would be the other guy. In fact, I'm in a best ball draft, and those are the two running backs I'm looking at right now is Penny and Chuba Hubbard for different reasons. Penny could land somewhere else and have that same role as Hubbard. Hubbard could also get usurped by, maybe someone in the front office of Carolina likes one of these free agent running backs a lot, and we don't know that. And whatever we think is their, optimal rebuilding strategies, they were like, we need a running back that can do X, Y, and Z. And okay, we're going to bring him in. We have no idea. But I'm just following the logic ladder. It seems like Chuba Hubbard's a value right now.
Yeah, I think relative to what you're going to have to pay for a guy like A.J. Dillon or a guy like Khalil Herbert or Ramondre Stevenson, the guys that are going to get the bump because someone else is leaving their backfield, James Cook. I would take the volume of give me 3 shots at Chuba Hubbard's instead of buying one of those guys that are going to be more costly over the next couple months anyway, when the reality is, are they that much better? So I like it. I like the call.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at yards per carry last year, 4.9. So Hubbard was good last year, and then the carry volume went up, went from 9 to 14, 17, then it dipped back down. Then he finished out week 18 with 21 carries. So, and always getting more targets than Foreman.
Can I interest you still in buying on Antonio Gibson?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's another one where I actually think he's got a pretty good shot for his backfield to look very similar to what it did last year, which is a good thing. But even if they add somebody like that, that's still somebody that I'm going to go down with the ship with.
Who are they going to add? They just added a 3rd rounder, and they have exactly what you want if you're one of these prototypical coaches, which is what they have, where it's like, I need a running back that's going to go between the tackles, and I need a running back that's going to be in the passing game. Well, you have both of those things. It just so happens that Gibson can do it all, and you are squandering him, but you do have those things. There's very little incentive for Washington to go in the running back market.
They'll probably add somebody, but how good that somebody is, what that somebody looks like.
I know what he looks like. They're going to say, well, we're losing J.D. McKissick, so we need another guy that's going to look like J.D. McKissick. So they're going to go out and get a guy that looks kind of like J.D. McKissick.
They could, but they could also add another guy that looks kind of like Brian Robinson and just have him as the backup to Brian Robinson, not threatening Brian Robinson.
Like an upgrade on Jonathan Williams.
But would it shock you if
that would be great?
Ron Rivera adds Chris Rodriguez in the 5th round, and you're going like, well, that guy kind of looks a little bit like Brian Robinson, but I can see that. I can see that that's what they add, and they go, let's just see how it shakes out. So I think
Rodriguez, that would be just the stone worst draft pick. He's terrible. Wow. Okay.
Something that looks like that. What if they add like Chase Brown in the 5th?
Oh my God. You just named the. Did you know you just named the 2 worst performing running backs of the Senior Bowl?
I know.
So the most slug-like running back was Rodriguez, and the most mistake-prone running back was Chase Brown by far and away. Chase Brown, it was almost comical how many mistakes he made in pass pro with fumbles. Again, not full contact fumbles. And drop passes, it was absolutely wild. I'm looking at the list of running backs that they could potentially sign in free agency. I think you're talking about maybe like a Jamal Williams. If Jamal Williams doesn't go back to Detroit, that would be a possibility. Or Dante Foreman, like you were talking about. Dante Foreman, bringing him in to back up Brian Robinson.
Or if
that wouldn't threaten Gibson at all, that'd be perfect. Yeah, I'm regretting not mentioning Gibson earlier because he's right in that area. He's right in that same zone. In fact, we have him between Herbert and Gainwell in the rankings. So that's perfect. If
Well,
you
they
want a better
also-
team, man, or his team had any faith in him, be
They're
higher.
bringing in potentially Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator. Could you see a Gus Edwards maybe?
Gus Edwards, that's it. That's the guy I was trying to. Yes, that's the level of mediocrity at grinder running back guy they would bring in.
But if you're banking on Brian Robinson grinder, you don't want to see a Gus Edwards or a Deontay Foreman, right?
No.
You don't want to see another guy that kind of looks like that at all. I mean, so we'll see.
We are not high on Brian Robinson. That's a spoiler alert for our rankings. We are not high on Brian Robinson, and it sounds like Scott Connor's not either. Just not the type of running back that we generally invest in any way, shape, or form. Give us one more running back that you would consider to be radioactive in Dynasty, where he's not Fournette, James Conner, Ezekiel Elliott, where the air is already leaked out of the balloon. He's still pretty inflated, but you're terrified.
Well, maybe this isn't the perfect one because I don't think we're to inflated status yet, but I will go down, and you're not going to like this one. You are not going to like this one.
Ruh-roh.
So I went through this weekend, looked at a ton of running back efficiency data, and I couldn't squint to find a reason to like this player other than he's pretty athletic and he's gotten some hype. So normally when I see those two things, I go, all right, where does the market stand? Joshua Kelly. Joshua Kelly. If
no one's high on Kelly.
That when they hired Kellen Moore, Josh Kelly is going to play the Tony Pollard role, Matt.
Oh, what?
Yeah. And then you compare them side by side, and you go, they look nothing alike. Their efficiency has been nothing similar through his first 3 years. So, just saying, there's going to be a window where you can actually. It's not about selling Josh Kelly high. It's about actually being able to sell him because someone might want him.
Wow, we have an RB77, just so you know.
And I'm just saying, there's going to be a window where you will be able to sell him. Give me two guys at the Eric Gray level, and I'll laugh to the bank because I got two shots at a third or fourth round running back in this class, and I'm out on Josh Kelly. So.
I think you're wrong about where the market is on Joshua Kelly. I don't think anyone's paying anything for that guy.
You don't think you get 2/3 for Josh Kelly?
No. What? Maybe 29 thirds. Hey, give us one. That was such a Dynasty joke.
Someone that's not. You wouldn't even consider him radioactive because he's nothing, right?
He's not ready. He doesn't have enough like plutonium to even be radioactive ever. So there was never enough power producing material to even get there. Give us someone else.
Here's one.
I mean, I'm talking about someone like, I'm not going to say Nick Chubb. I love Nick Chubb. I'm not going to say Nick Chubb. I'm not going to do it. Though I love Jerome Ford.
Someone they compare to Nick Chubb, and they're not anywhere alike. So I'll say Javonte Williams is radioactive.
Ooh, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Limited sample size. He's only played 21 games, but his opportunity rate, which I basically just define as what is his target rate? What is his chances of getting a target versus a carry? It's on the very low end. It's less than 35%. So even though he had that span last year, you remember the start where he was a PPR monster. People are going to remember that. But that's not what his profile, I think, is going to be long term. And he's coming off the serious injury. This is going to be the Dobbins of this year. If he comes back and you get anything from him over the summer that he's ready to go, I'm out. This is a team.
I remember J.K. Dobbins. That's a cautionary tale.
This is a team that I would not be shocked if they draft a running back in this draft that we like. Kenny McIntosh, Kendre Miller. And then you get in there and you go,
they draft Kendre Miller. That's bad.
But that's my point, is they draft a running back we like. We don't expect it because we have Javonte Williams in the top 12 or better in Dynasty. They bring in a guy and you go, damn, this guy's just as good. And now we're in trouble. Now we're looking at more of a platoon committee back that's not, even if he doesn't fall much in value in terms of demand, people are going to be looking at him like, yeah, this is that this is not a guy I want to pay for. He's more of just one of those like dead zone running backs. So Javonte.
No, God, we're gonna move him down. We gotta revisit some assumptions on the opportunity share for Javonte Williams over the next few years. I'm going to insist that we revisit this. Public service announcement for the audience. Look forward to Javonte Williams moving down. I believe we have him too high. I'm embarrassed at this point about it. There may be some Kool-Aid that was being drunk here. Flowosaurus on YouTube. Sean Payton has talked about Latavius Murray's leadership and attitude already. Wow. If that doesn't say oops for this Javonte Williams ranking, nothing else does. That's crazy. I can't believe he's already. That's the priority, Sean? That's who you're going to be hyping? Oh,
well, he had Latavius in New Orleans.
Loves
you
him.
remember.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Loves
and he's a free agent. So if they were to bring him back, I still don't think that inhibits them from drafting somebody. But if they bring Latavius back, that's not good for Javonte Williams either.
What if they bring Latavius back and then draft Eric Gray?
It's a death knell.
It's terrible because you're the whole thing is the passing game activity, right? It's the receiving. They bring in Eric Gray. It's like now what is Javonte? He's the heir apparent to the grinder role when he gets back. If Latavius isn't, oh my God,
he's a bigger Devin Singletary.
Stop
We're gonna feed him.
No! Stop, Scott.
We're gonna feed him inside the 20s, but not give him any targets and not give him any goal line carries.
Oh my God, we're gonna be. Oh man, I want it, but I don't want it. Like this show to be clipped, that segment. Months from now when Javonte Williams is imploding, oh, man, I want it, but I don't want it. God damn it. All right. Who's going to be this year's Amon-Ra St. Brown? That guy that's like outside the top 25, but then sneaks his way in to the top 10. Who's a guy like that? Maybe he has like day 3 draft capital, maybe not the fastest guy, but right guy, right team, right everything.
All right, I got one for you.
Surging.
I haven't heard a lot of talk about this guy. Marvin Mims.
Ooh. You're a big Marvin Mims guy. He just got drafted in his best ball league I'm in. I thought it was a little early.
He's a guy that's been productive, but not ever hyper productive, but he's been productive every year. I do think his draft capital is going to be right in the range you're talking about. He's probably going to be a mid-round 3 pick at best.
Wow.
So you're going to be having to fight the stigma of, he's not a first or second round pick. That's almost locked in that he's not going to go top 63.
And Denzel's not doing him any favors with the name.
The name knocks him down like half a round right there.
Kills is like prestige.
Even though they're not related, that just crushes them.
I know. It's like, man, why you got to do me like that? We're not related. People, we're not related to this guy.
That's one of those young guys, though. He's a 21-year-old, early declare, good production in college, but not great. Suffered a little bit this year because, he's had 3 different quarterbacks in 3 years. So he's been productive. He was productive with Spencer Rattler and with Caleb Williams. So you got to give him a little credit there. Productive in 2 different offenses. So I think he's being slept on a little bit relative to some of the other guys. Parker Washington is another one. Those 2 are ones that have good profiles and that just doesn't seem to be translating to their draft capital. So both of those.
I loved what I saw from Jaden Reed at the Senior Bowl. So I'm excited to see what happens with him.
It's a bad wide receiver class.
Yeah, he transferred in. So whenever you see a guy transfer in from a small school, they typically don't come out early. Right? It's a lot to ask a guy to transfer from a small school and then put up just 1 or 2 seasons and then come out. So most of the guys that were the most impressive at the Senior Bowl either had injuries, like Tajay Spears, multiple knee injuries in college, or there was some sort of irregularity with their college career, and that was Jaden Reed actually fit that, even though I was like, hey, he played 3 years at Michigan State, but that first year I think it was at Western Michigan. So what about the running back position? Is there a running back? Like, I'm very excited about seeing Roshan test. I've heard from everybody that's familiar with the Texas program that he was the most athletic player on the team. Again, just makes me like Bijan more. So is there another running back where you think, oh God, this is going to be face melting stuff?
I don't want to say face melting. I am interested to see just how athletic Zach Charbonnet is, because that's one of the few guys that if he tests better than we expect, you can squint and you can see a Joe Mixon type profile. Like a really good athletic profile that there isn't a lot of other guys like. There's no other guys like that in this class that are 220.
Catching 37 passes?
Right.
Hell yeah.
That can catch the ball. And if he can run like a sub 4.5 at that 6 foot, 220 plus with some receptions, I think he's somebody that I don't know if the NFL is going to value him a lot more. Like, they're not going to pump him up and take him, in the first half of the second round.
They don't like him. My assumption was that they don't like him. The NFL doesn't like him because they know he's not that fast. That's always been my assumption with him.
That's why I want to see him run. If he runs a 4.58,
like, I want to see it. Yeah. Run the 4.6. Prove it. Yep.
But he's one of the ones where he has all the profile except for we don't know how fast he is. But if you lock in, let's just say he ran like a 4.46, you're going to start kind of squinting and seeing some of those historical comps, and you're going to be like, damn, that's good.
Runs a 4.46. I'm going to be very excited.
Yeah. If he runs a 4.46, he's probably RB 3 or 4 in the class for most people pre-draft, just because there's nobody else like him in this class.
It's like a David Johnson situation.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. All right, man. Hey, we did it. Hey, whoa. 10 burning questions. Last one. Give us your truther. Give us the guy that you have stashed everywhere, hasn't done dick, but you still like him. Mine's Ashton Doolin. So you can't take that. Can't take him.
I won't take Ashton Doolin. I've relegated him to a roster clogger. So even though I actually have I'll tell you offline, I have a pretty good story about Ashton Doolin. But I'm from Ohio, so I know Ashton Doolin well. I knew him well before the NFL knew of him. So that's an interesting one.
He's been underrated for a long time.
Yeah, and one of those guys that's just been overlooked his entire career. Even getting to college, he was overlooked. So I'm with you on him. I like him. I just don't like him for Dynasty just because he's probably in relegated to roster clogger status and he's never coming back. Ah, man, you put me on the spot because I am not a player Dynasty player. As anyone that's listened to this show or listened to me, I'm very much a process over players agnostic type of Dynasty player.
Yeah.
I'll say
must be a guy that you're still irrationally believing in.
I won't say irrationally. I will say that one of the ones that still I just can't stop going back to the well. I'm going to say, and I'm making tons of excuses for last year. I'm going to say Albert Okwuegbunam.
Wow! Where's my thing broke? My sounder. I got to get another one.
Get it.
Yes! Thank you. God, what a weird season last year. That was the weirdest season. Came back at the end and was great again.
Yeah, guys like him will get many chances. I'm just banking that he's going to take advantage of it. And you know what? There might be somebody that comes along that goes, we kind of like you. We want you around. We want to give you the ball.
What do these guys have to do to get respect? What is it? It's so weird. You have some players that get all this respect that's not deserved, right? And all this benefit of the doubt. And then you have guys like Ashton Doolin and Albert Okwuegbunam who you're like, what did they do? What did they do wrong? What did they say? What happened? How? Everything I'm looking at is a signal that this guy deserves more opportunity, not less.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you feel a little better about Alberto, the fact that they jettisoned his entire coaching staff that wouldn't give him even a chance to. I mean, he's only active for like 5 games last year. Like, they just stone cold made him inactive. they're playing Eric Tomlinson and Eric Salbert over him. So I can forgive that. You just got to bet on the talent. And I'm more likely to continue to go back to the well with these tight ends that look like him, regardless of how long they've been around. Because a lot of times it just takes something to click.
Takes time. He's only 24.
Yeah, I'm still going to go back to Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki, David Njoku. Like, I'll give those guys until they're like 30 before I go, I'm out. And a lot of people have already, a lot of people give up on tight ends after 3 years if they're not Travis Kelce. It's like you're just playing it wrong. It's a position where the production track can be all over the map, and it can be year 4 or year 5 before a tight end even figures it out. So, yeah, going back to the well on him.
And that, Scott, is the show.
Boom.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out PlayerProfiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.